Alrighty, so happy Wonder Wednesday, everyone, and welcome back to our Floxies Community live streams. I love that you're already in the chat. I just wanted to test the waters and see who was in there already. I can see Elsa, Marcelo, good friend Marcelo. Great to see you here, Lucas. And if you are watching us right now, let me know in the chat. And we often like to say this: we want for our events to be as interactive as possible. So do come along, use the chat to interact and learn with us here at Floxies. And if this is your first time here, we're Floxies Community, an international community for women in UX UI design and Webflow development. And we gather together here every Wednesday, offering you these free live streams to help you further develop your career and knowledge in design and Webflow. And we usually invite influential guest speakers from either the design or the Webflow space to come and teach our community. And so, without further ado, let me show you where we host our events because I'm sure that you will like it. And if you've never seen it before, I've had a lot of comments of people that have really enjoyed our platform here. So what you're seeing right now, this is our co-working virtual office space in a platform called GatherTown. What you see right here, this is where we work together on a Monday afternoon. And if you're interested in the platform, let me know. I'm always very happy to give people a tour of the office. But for today, we're going into our auditorium right here. Hello, hello. Happy Wonder Wednesdays, Floxies. Great to see you all here. Taking a seat. Yes, well done. Hi, Nicoletta, waving. And Alessia, fantastic. Great. You're exactly where you need to be. You were born for this. You're a superstar. And welcome to our Floxies community.
Thanks for having me. It's so great. I mean, I'm in the middle of so much talent in here. So, yeah, I think everyone should take a turn to take the podium at some point. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Why not? And that's exactly what we're trying to do here, right? We encourage women in our community to, yes, do come up on stage, come and teach us something. We have, as you're saying, we have so much talent, but also we are so very fortunate and lucky to have people like you who are really smashing it out there to come and teach us. We're so fortunate to have you for about 4 events with us this year. And so yeah, I cannot wait. So I was just saying at the very beginning that our community focuses on connecting women in UX UI design and Webflow. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that, right? You're the co-founder at Code and Wonder, an agency, a Webflow agency in the UK. You also, I think you do a little bit of no code as well. So you can tell us a little bit more about that. But the reason why I wanted for our community to niche down in UX, UI, and Webflow is because I really see that those two skills, two, three, or four, seven, 800 skills, to really combine perfectly together. And I've witnessed it inside of the community. We have amazing designers that have started collaborating with Webflow developers in here. And so if you've been following our events in the past couple of weeks, we just wrapped a series on design with Lizzie as our teacher, and so today we're very, very, very super lucky to have you here to teach us a little bit of Webflow, so that we can really help forge these two skills and create more collaborations, create more teams inside of our Floxies community.
Sounds great. Yeah, like you said, it's becoming more and more of a blurred line. Like, where does the designer, as a web designer, stop, and where does the developer start? Because with all these visual coding tools, it becomes more and more blurred, the line.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Absolutely. And how
yeah,
did you, Alessia, how did you get into design? Before we start diving into the topic of today, which is, how to structure a Webflow website, just to give us a little bit of, give us some magic, give us some spark to
good. It's a
inspire our
story.
journey.
It's not a linear story like everyone else, I feel. So I studied product design, so physical products. And then I finished that. I kind of struggled getting a product design job. So I did lots of little bits and I freelanced. So I got into graphic design. Then I started a startup in which I've learned what a cash flow is and all of like the business terms of it. And this is like a speedway through my journey. I went into project management. So I worked in a digital agency as a project manager, managing lots of different clients, understanding a bit more about the agency world and how design and development comes together, and managing clients and what are their needs and how everything should be structured. And then from that, I started Code and Wonder. So actually, my background is not really design or development. it's more like management and I guess a bit of product design, but that was just my studies. I didn't actually practice it. So it's a mix of everything, and it kind of shows how you need a little bit of everything to kind of make it work. I guess as a freelancer as well, because freelancers have so many hats that they have to wear. But yeah, in the general industry, you have so many practices, and they all come together to create
Yeah.
amazing work.
And I love
So
that you're saying it's not such a linear journey, because I'm just gonna exit the full screen here. I'm just gonna look at the room of Fluxies that we have. So if you're here but you don't have a design background, you're just pivoting into design or Webflow development, whatever it is, give us an emoji, give us a wave. I would love to see. Michelle just spawned next to me. How nice is that? So if you don't have a design background and you pivoted into design, maybe let us know. Let us know in the chat as well. I can see there's Marcelo that says hi to you, Alessia. He says an awesome Webflow agency. Elsa's there. Delina, great. But I can tell, I can talk on behalf of the whole community. There's so many people that have joined the design space coming from all sorts of backgrounds, whether, just like me, from education, or we have opera singers, all sorts of backgrounds that somehow have found their way into design and Webflow development. And so, yeah, I love that. I love that, you're here giving an example of how successful somebody could be, it could become, even if they haven't followed that traditional path.
yeah, for sure. Um, right. Shall we
Should we
jump
get
in?
started? Let's go. Let's
Yes.
go. And we love that we're going, and accountants as well, Irina says. Absolutely.
Oh, you got everything. Lawyers as well, I've heard.
Lawyers, all sorts. And I love that we're going to be focusing on Webflow today, because I feel like that's the one platform that changed my life and my career. And I'm sure many people here could say the same. I'm aware there are different platforms before you start naming them. But today we are building on Webflow. So
Today is just Webflow. Yes. So, yes, I just want to, before we start and we jump in, I mean, Webflow is a visual builder for creating sites, right? And you can create sites in lots of different ways. So, I want to focus on how I build sites, which is not the only way to build sites, but it's one way. And I always try when I go through things to explain why I do certain things in a certain way, if there is a reason. Sometimes it's just personal preference, and then I'll point that out just so you know, like the reason behind it, because I like to give you that background as well. So just preemptive thing. So let's dig in. So, like you said, we had another workshop of four lessons by Lizzie, which was amazing. And if you haven't seen that, I think, Claudia, they're all on YouTube,
yeah,
right? So you can go
absolutely.
back and review all of them. And she went through such an amazing job of going through personal branding, mood boards, wireframing, and design. So I'm kind of picking up from that last episode, and we're going to go into Webflow. So once you have whatever, like it could be your personal sites or portfolio or just a normal site, I'm not really focusing on what it is, but how to build it. We're going to split it into 4 sessions. And the first one is project setup. And I know it sounds so boring and vague, but actually it's For me, it's very important because then it allows me to do everything else much quicker. So if you get that set up right, I feel like everything else, it becomes a breeze and so much easier.
I love that.
Um, but the few other sessions that I'm planning are, classes and frameworks, actually building in Webflow, and then a little bit about animations.
Spring
So
some animations love for
yes.
everyone. But I love that you said that you're saying, first off, not boring at all, because it's so important to master the foundations of anything if you want to then, as you're saying, have a speedier, like focus on what you love, which I think we had an event last week with Karen as well. And she was saying exactly the same things in terms of design. Like you really have to kind of document, have a process, a map of your process in your head, or if you document it, if you use Miro or anything else really, but to have a clear structure really helps you speed up when it comes to the things that you love, like designing and developing on Webflow.
Yeah. And for this one, I decided to start like completely from scratch. So
Hmm.
not taking any pre-made templates or anything like that. So you can really see how I would set everything up. Um, but then, you can create your own boilerplate template and you don't have to go through this whole process over and over again. So it might be a little bit long-winded at first, but then you can create that as your template that you can duplicate, and it will be much quicker as you create more sites.
Sounds good.
So we're going to take an example as design because it's a visual platform, so might as well pick one. And we're going to focus on the Dare to Share landing page, which was designed by Benton and built by me. So yeah, we can go through that process. It has a bit of everything, like bold text, lots of colors, lots of layouts, a few animations, and so forth. We won't build the whole page because, we only have 4 lessons with each other. But we're going to pick and choose certain aspects of it, which really like brings it to life, and it makes sense within the lessons that I want to show you. So let's start with part 1. So we're going to go through the project settings. We're going to set up a few variables, and then we're going to style our text and HTML tags. So that's what we're going to do today. And I want this to be kind of interactive. So I'm going to go through everything, but if anything doesn't make sense, or you're like, oh, wait a second, go back 2 steps, what have you done there? Just jump in, interrupt me, and ask me questions. So,
Absolutely. And I would encourage everyone as well, like if you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, do drop your questions in the chat. I'll try to check all the platforms. But yes, Flux is here. This is our chance. We're lucky to have these 60 minutes every week, so do make the most out of it.
so let's jump
Into Inception
into
world.
Inception world, and then into Webflow. So imagine this is a brand new site. It's completely, well, kind of empty. And what I actually like to jump in first is the settings of the site and do 2 main things. So the first one is go to SEO. And hopefully my internet is good enough that it will load. Yeah. And turn off the indexing. So this is like a stupid thing that Webflow has, where at the beginning, by default, everything is indexed. And what that means is being picked up by Google search. So you might, if you forget to turn it off, it might be that Google indexes it. And then after a while you're building, your clients go, why is my Webflow subdomain come up on Google search, and people are looking at it and viewing the work in progress and so forth. So that's kind of the first thing I always do, is turn this off so that it doesn't go on Google. And the second thing is uploading my fonts. So I already did this for this one. So I've got my font here. You can upload it by clicking the upload button. And you might notice that this is actually a Google font. And the reason why I don't use the font list is because this one actually uses the Google API, which tracks user data like the IP address. So it's not actually GDPR compliant, and you have to, like, as soon as you use a Google font from the API, you have to put your cookie banner and ask for consent and all of those things. While if you upload it yourself, it doesn't tie in with the API, so it's local or like uploaded individually. So I always like to have, the fonts uploaded like this to avoid any GDPR things that might come through.
Mm.
So that's the settings for now. That's step one, done.
It's so
Adding
interesting
those.
because, for example, that indexing tip is something that I never look at, and good to know.
Oh, and another thing on that, once you finish off with the site, everything got approved, and you're transferring the site to the client, that SEO indexing resets when you transfer the site. So after transferring it, I'm usually add it as a guest to the workspace. I go back in and remove the indexing just in case they take a while to connect their main domain or stuff like that. But yeah, it gets resets when you transfer. So be careful.
Good to know.
Right. So that's it for step one. That was the easiest part. And
That
now
was smooth.
we can jump into the designer. And you can see here, just because I thought we don't have infinite time, I've just added a few things that we're gonna look at afterwards. But for now, I'd like to focus on the variables. So I'm talking about this with thinking that you all have the knowledge of what Webflow is and how it kind of works. So please jump in if you're like, what is a variable? I have no idea what you're talking about. But just to give maybe a little bit of
Yeah,
context.
maybe just a short description of what a variable is,
Yeah. So the
for
easiest
example.
one, the easiest thing might be taking colors, for example, as an example. So if you select any item on the page, I don't know, they changed it now because of variables. But before, you used to have like swatches saved that you can save for the project. And then you can refer to that color swatch. And if you change the swatch itself, it will change the color throughout where it was used. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that wasn't even that long ago that, they had swatches.
So variables are exactly like swatches, or rather, swatches are variables, which means that everything here, wherever this little plus, I'm still sharing, right? You can see the
Yeah,
workflow.
yeah.
Yeah. Wherever you see this purple plus that comes up, that allows you to link it to a variable, which means you have the variable, which is the source of truth, and you're just referring to that source. So let's say you have, I don't know, images on the site with rounded corners, and then you have cards on the side with rounded corners as well, and you want all these to match. You can set all the border radius here linked to a variable, which means that if in the future you decide, oh, actually, I don't want rounded corners anymore, I want it like 90 degrees angles, you can change that in the variable, and it will change it across the whole site where that variable was referenced. Does that make it a little bit clearer?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's what they call them on Figma as well, but they might have changed the name by now. I don't know. But is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually a development term. So
Mm.
variables existed in development for way, way longer before Figma as well.
Yeah, but I just love
Um,
the fact that they're using the same kind of terminology to reinforce that idea that we were just trying to portray at the beginning of, a Figma designer working with a Webflow developer. Then they're using the same terminology, which aids, communication and collaboration. So it's good.
yeah. And that's where the line becomes blurrier and blurrier, like Figma design tool, Webflow development tool, it all kind of merges together, which is great. So going back to the build, the second thing I do is add all my variables. So what I would do is look at my project and pick out all the colors that is being used. So all the like yellow and green and, the gray, the black and so forth. And I would add these as variables. And what I like to do is to split the colors into the ones just used for background and the ones just used for text. And I mean, in this specific example, it might not matter as much, but I have come across like designs which they have a brown color or whatever color, and the background is a bit like a lighter shade of brown, and the text is a darker shade of brown. But they're only used for the background or the text. So I like to differentiate them both. So what I do is, start with color, and then I go create kind of like a group or a folder. So you can do that by adding this / and maybe I'll zoom in so you can see a little bit better.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So I have color for background, and then in terms of naming, it really depends on the site and on the design. Because ideally, I would have a primary color, secondary, maybe highlight, maybe an error for like a reddish color if it's used for errors, so that in case the client decides to change the color later on, it's still the primary color, whether it's blue, red, green, or whatever it is. But in this case, we have so many colors that there isn't really a primary or secondary one. So in this case, I would just name the colors. So I would go white, and you can see here it grouped it the first kind of two names, which you can now edit the whole group, which is great, or you can edit the individual variable. I would add, all the colors. I've got purple, I've got green, and so forth, and I would add all the hex colors in here. So I'm gonna just do this for just the sake of speed. Oops, that was green.
Yeah, that was green. I was gonna say.
Yeah. Purple.
In a world with AI, I can imagine this being sort of like AI'd. Is that a verb in the future?
It should be. You coined it. You can claim it. But you can, flick between Figma and Webflow and just copy and paste all of the hex code to make sure that it matched the design exactly, and keep going, adding all your background colors, got yellow and so forth. I probably won't add all of them here just because I know we have limited time, but you kind of get the gist. You add all of these. Next one, you would add the color for the text. So it might be, oops, wrong one. Let's see if I can do this. Yes, it works. Great. So I'll group it in color text, and then I would have a dark one, which might be black or close to black. And I'll have a light, which might be white. And you might have lots of different text colors in here as well. But I'll just keep these two for now. Another thing that I like to add in my variables is fonts, because that's also something, I don't know, let's say, it's always like future proofing the site. So let's say one day the brand decides to change the font color or rebrand completely. It's a lot easier if you just need to change the variable instead of going through every single one. And what I like to call them, and just like font, and I differentiate them for heading. So I got headings, and I do another one for the body. Because generally speaking, you might have the same font, like in this case. So here we go, our
Because less
custom
is more.
font.
Alessia,
Yeah.
Elsa says, you don't realize how hard it is to teach about style guides, frameworks, and variables until you are actually teaching it to a complete beginner. Props to Alessia for breaking everything down.
Thank you. That's why I was like, I'm going to try and keep this succinct and quick because I could go down so many rabbit holes. But anyway, so yeah, even if they're both like different, even if it's the same font, I like it to split it out just in case one day they decide, oh, actually, we want a different font for the headings. So, you can change it later on. Another thing that I like to add in here is the radius. So, what I got? Usually I just use like small, medium, and things like that. So if we look at the design again, there's not that many. There's the button, which have a radius, and then there's these cards that have a small radius, and then we've got these or maybe not in this one. These other ones which might have like a bigger radius. So I would put them all in here, and I would use naming convention like small, medium, and large or big. It's up to you. And one other one that I like to do is just call it button. So I know that this is specific just for the button. Again, why do I do this? It's mainly also future proofing, and you always get those clients that are like, actually, I want all the buttons square, and you're like, oh. And it's fine if you're just using one primary button, but if they have lots of different styles and they have a primary, secondary, tertiary, and so on, and they're all using the same radius, then it's one click instead of three. So it could save some time in there. And these could be 0.5 rems. This could be I've got actually a 6 rem in here.
Bonus episodes, lesson number 5 on REMs and all those things. I'm adding that.
Okay. We'll just add lessons later on. It's fine.
I'm joking. Don't panic. But yeah, it's people here in the
Yeah,
community know how much I still struggle with those.
I mean, you have, especially when you look at different frameworks, some of them they say, oh, you just use EM or you just use REMs, and actually, there's no one unit fits all. It's good to understand what each unit does and what they mean, so that you can use the best one for like the different
I love that.
cases. But yeah, that's a whole lesson.
Yeah, that's a whole lesson.
And maybe if we have time, we'll see. And I've got a few more things. So another thing I like to add again in terms of size is the spacing. And this only works for designs that are very consistent in the spacing that they use. So, well, Benton in particular, he's great at using consistency. So all the spacing is kind of repeated. So this is the same as this, and this is the same as, this one, and so forth. So where you have consistent spacing, you might want to do those as variables. I mean, there's always, cases where it doesn't make sense because it's a completely artistic website and it has no consistency at all. So in that case, don't use variables.
No restraints to creativity, which by the way is such a great initiative, the Dare to Share. Maybe we can share something about it when after the lesson, but such a beautiful project.
Yeah, I was planning to invite everyone to share, but yeah, I can remind me after. It could be of one of the links that we share at the end. And in terms of naming of spacing, I mean, I go back and forth, but for now, I like to use, again, like tiny, small, medium, large, huge, these kind of naming convention rather than specific pixels. Just because, yeah, they could vary when it comes to responsiveness, not so much in variables, but that's kind of what I'm going for these days. So small and medium, large, and huge. And then all of these would have, your whatever the design asks for. So these could vary according to, what you have in there. Something like this, maybe. And
Kiandra on YouTube. Hi, Kiandra. You can join us on Gather if you want, by the way. She says, good advice about EMs, REMs, etc. I've been working with CSS for over 10 years and I still use a cheat sheet. Lol.
yeah, it took me a very long time to remember what the difference is. Same with, relative and absolute. I always got them confused. I had to write them down.
You see, that one
Now
I
I
love. That one I love. The relative absolute parent-child relationship. I love. Maybe it's more. I don't know why, but I love it. It's just like as soon as it starts becoming a little bit more maths oriented, you lose me.
yeah, got you. Great. So we've done the spacing. And now there's one more thing that I usually add to my variables, which is the font size. But there's a little thing that I want to show you first because it will make more sense if you understand this. So when it comes to font sizes, it's you might have a fixed font for desktop, one font for tablet, and one font for mobile. But then I always find when you resize the browser and you go into those awkward browser width where it's, still in desktop breakpoint, but it's a bit narrow and the text looks super huge, but those are the breakpoints. So what I like to introduce is responsive text. And how I do that, I'm going to show you in a minute here. So let's start at the top of this pyramid because it will make a lot more sense. So when you use responsive units such as view width, which means the size of your viewport or the browser size, that is responsive because it takes, it's, 25% of the viewport. So if you shrink it down, the size also will shrink down with it. So that's what I mean with responsive text. And you have a few responsive units such as percentages, view width, view height. What I usually go for is the view width because that's kind of the browser width of it. So If the font size is 25 view width, it will be 25% of the size of the width of the browser. So far, so good.
Yeah. It's like a portion. Now my relationship is cakes and food. So it's just like a portion of, if you've got a bigger cake, then it's a bigger slice that you get.
Exactly. Perfect. Perfect analogy. I love it. Now, what happens, especially if you have your whole content is contained in a wrapper, so you have a maximum width of your content, that is not included if you just use view width. So if you have a huge screen, but your content maybe has a max width, you'll still have a huge title that goes above and beyond that restriction. So here's where I introduce clamp. And what clamps allows you to do is to take this responsive value and have a minimum value and maximum value. So the font size won't go below 3 rems and won't go above 30 rems. And these you can define here. So now you still have a responsive font size, but you have two extremes. So you have a maximum and a minimum, so that it won't get too huge or too small in relative to the browser and the rest of the design. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we got a couple questions in the chat. One of them is related to the variables that you were showing earlier, which was how do you create those groups of variables, like the font, radius, spacing? They're all grouped together. How do you create the group itself?
Yeah, you can create it by a /. So if you have, so now we're gonna do type. So this could be a variable, or if you add the /, it becomes the group.
At the end of it?
You can,
okay.
At the end of it, and then you type the name of the variable. So let's say h1. So it's alphabetically ordered, so it goes at the bottom. So type becomes the group, and whatever is after the / becomes the variable.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And you can only have one group. So for example, here you can see I've got color/text. So only the last element of the slash becomes the variable, and whatever is before that, it becomes the group.
Nice.
Because in this case, I would have color/text/dark to create this. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. Awesome. And then going back to clamp, Nicoletta was asking, will we see these in practice?
Yes. Maybe in this session or in the next one, depending on timing.
Awesome.
So going further down, so we got that this is the minimum, this is the maximum. Now, if we want to make it accessible, so like I did here, you can zoom in or zoom out of your browser and the font size changes. That is because we're using the rem unit. And this comes back to the units. So this is kind of, it ticks the accessibility points because, you can zoom in and out and the font will respond to that. The problem is that if we're using view width, the size of the browser is not changing. So even if we zoom in and out, the font won't become bigger or smaller. So it's not ticking the accessibility boxes. So to change that, what we can do is have a little calculation. So we introduce calc, and then we introduce this 4 rems plus the 25 view width. Now this, I usually eyeball it and change the numbers and see what looks right. I know that in the live stream, the Webflow live stream, Aaron shared a calculation sheet that you can calculate exactly what these numbers should be in. So If I find it, I'll share it with you.
Yeah, I think you
If I
did.
find the link.
Didn't he? Yeah.
So yeah, I don't have that sheet at hand, but you can go and figure it out. But basically, what it means. So if you zoom in, it will multiply this for rem, and then it will add the view width. So it will still zoom in and out the font size, but still being responsive. And the last step is introducing the variables into this calculation. So instead of using a fixed 3 rems, you could add here what we're going to add different variables. So I'm going to call them max, so type max and type min. And these would replace these values here, minimum and maximum values. And to get this variable, all you have to do is, if you go back to the variable and you click on the settings here and you click on this, it just copies automatically to your clipboard. So yeah, this is your CSS variable that you can copy and paste into your calculation. So this is what the long thing is.
So
And I felt like if I just
CSS.
and this would be the font size, yeah, in the CSS. So I felt like if I showed you this, you'll run away. So I like went through how I got there and what everything means. So how hopefully is a little bit more clear.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll need a rewatch of this particular section.
Yeah. And well, not to plug my whole thing, but I've got a video explaining this as well.
Oh, of
So
course.
if you
Do plug away. The
rewatch,
more the better.
it's always cringe when I'm like, oh, go and watch my video. So going back to the variables, the way I like to name it, I mean, there's lots of naming conventions. There's no, good or bad one. I find it's personal preference how you do it. But I like to split it up of H1, H2, so I kind of know what I'm pulling or what I'm defining. H3, I mean, go as low level of H as the design requires. In this case, I'm going to stop at 3, but I know that some designs or some contents go down to 4, 5, 6, and so forth. But I'm just going to do that for now. And then I also do this for the body, so the paragraph sizes. And most of the time you have a few different sizes of the paragraph. So I like to do a large and medium and small and tiny. And then you put your rems for each one of these. And then you create a new variable again for type. And this time we're going to do the minimum one. And I do exactly the same ones in here as these ones. So these will define our maximum and these will define our minimum values. So the reason why I do this is mainly because variables don't yet have variants of different breakpoints, because ideally I would define my H1 for desktop, for tablet, for mobile, and so forth. But it's not something that it's yet supported in Webflow. So I find this is the easiest way. I mean, the other option could be having 3 of these, and instead of max and minimum, you could have type desktop and type tablet and type mobile. I find that 2 is easier than 3, so this is how I do it. This is my explanation of it.
It's okay. You don't have to justify yourself. That's perfectly fine.
No, I like it. I like it because then you kind of get into my head of like why I'm doing things. I'm always curious of like how things work, so I always
Hmm.
ask, the three whys and why do you do this and how and why again. So I feel like it helps people understand as
Absolutely.
well.
Dissecting the structure is a very scientifical approach. I like it.
So I mean, I'm just looking at time and I think we only have 10 minutes left. So I'm not gonna fill all of these in, but hopefully you get the point of all of the variables that you can that I usually set up. And then once I have all of these, because these are mostly reused, I have a boilerplate where all of these are set up this way. So that I can just duplicate it when I'm starting a new project. And then I just need to either delete the ones that I'm not using or just populate the values that I need in here. So it's a bit laborious, but ideally you only get to do it once and then you have it for all the other projects as well.
Hmm.
And the last thing I had on my list for today, hopefully you get to do this, is just setting up my HTML tags. So the first one is kind of the body and what HTML tags are. If you click here, they're all the pink tags that you have. For a non-technical term, the pink ones. So I usually make sure that all of these are populated with my variables. So for example, I want the whole body to pull the font for the body. So here it's set to Arial. Now, if you, like we discussed before, if you click on the purple plus, you get to pick from the variables that you have. So in this case, I'm going to pick the body font and, the size. Now, the question is, I got this long thing, but here you can't really add it. So there's two ways of adding this. Either you go down to the custom properties where you can add custom CSS. So you can have font size. Here we go, font size. And then you basically copy and paste this whole long thing, making sure that your variables match the ones that you set up in your projects. And you paste it in here. The other option that you have is, it's a bit hidden, but if you click on the plus here and you have the list of variables, but you also have custom. So you can just type it in here as well. And the custom does exactly the same as the CSS property with the custom code. So you have two options there and where you can add it in.
That's cool.
So that's another little trick. So now, I don't have it copied actually. Can I copy it from here? No. But hopefully you get the point of how to add it in.
Yeah, it's like a
And
formula, isn't it? And in
yeah,
terms of looking at sizes, as you were scrolling back, we do have a question from Tonya in the chat. She says, "I'm curious on how you determine the individual rem sizes. Was that by using the formula?" Yeah.
for this one, so honestly, I eyeball it at the moment. So I pick like roughly how much the view width would be, and then I add maybe 1 or 2 rems here. But like I said, Aaron shared the spreadsheet with the exact formula. So in his spreadsheet, you can see the rem value in Figma, put it in, and it will tell you what this should be. So it's really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking for it.
It's in the. I should have pulled it before we started.
Don't
It's
worry.
in
We
the
automate all the
live
things.
stream.
Webflow. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Cool.
Yeah, it's a Webflow live stream. I think it was the one with Josh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry. We'll look for it and we'll send it to all the people in the community.
Great. Wait, I'm so zoomed in, I can't see anything in here. But then what I do is I set up my H tags here, and there's two that I do. So I've got the, all H2 tags. Actually, yeah. Probably start with the first one. I don't know why it flipped the order, but anyway, go for your H2 and you do the exact same one. So, for the size, you can go custom, paste in your calculation with your clamp, and so forth. Also, Webflow automatically, by default, adds some margin to these. And I like to put these as 0 for all of them. And in the next lessons, I'm going to tell you why. Little teaser in
Oh, I
there.
love that.
So you set all of these to 0 for each one of them. So you do your H3, set these to 0, add your sizing, and then making sure that you change your font to the headings one. I should have done this to the H2 as well. So heading font, and so forth. So you do the same for the H1. And then what you also do is you create a class for each one of these. So I've got here my heading 1, which, here we go. So they match. So heading 1, you also do exactly the same. So you change the font to the heading. You have the same size. You make sure they have the same weight. Everything exactly the same as your H1 tag. And the reason behind this, again with reasons, is that sometimes from a SEO perspective, or just like the order, you might have the H1 as the big title, and the H2s like lower down the page. But sometimes you want to, it should be an H2, but the design is designed like an H3. So you would have a H2 tag, but then the H3, the heading 3 class, so that you can, it's still consistent, but you get to select the correct HTML tag and then apply the styling in there. And when I choose the heading style, because sometimes if we go back here in the dare to share, I mean, this is an H1, but it's huge, right? So if, like, let's say if Dare to Share had a blog post, this probably wouldn't be the size of the H1. So you might even have another class saying like heading hero or something like that, just to differentiate it. And I guess the point I was trying to make is I don't style the headings depending on maybe the homepage, which will probably be the one which is the most different. But I would try and take the design of a blog post, for example, or where you have that rich text that you might not necessarily want to go in and style. And it's the most used sizes in there. So that's how I would style all the headings in here.
Is this page right here your style guide? And then is it like a separate page that you keep and style?
So controversial.
Hmm.
I actually have this in my boilerplate, and I usually style it all and then delete it completely. So I don't keep
Oh, okay.
a style guide. I probably should. I always find that when I'm building, and if there is a style guide, I never look at it. And there's always the danger of the client putting it live somewhere, and then getting indexed. So I don't usually keep a style guide. I do this for speed to set everything up. And again, if you have a boilerplate, all of these could be already set up. And if everything is linked, your font and everything to the variables, you don't even need to do this when you start a new project, because all you have to do is actually change your variables because everything is already connected. So yeah, you could keep it, or I actually delete it.
Okay, well, good to know. Just like good to. Oh, Nicoletta says, "What is a boilerplate?"
Yeah, true. I don't know why they're called boilerplates. It's a template. So it's an empty project with all of this set up that I keep in there. So as a starting point, so I never use it. I just always duplicate it. So that's a boilerplate.
So it's okay, yeah, like having
It's a
a
template.
Notion, yeah, like having an yeah, documentation, but on an unpublished site. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Well,
So
that's
that
smart.
yeah, that would save you, the hour that we just spent together because it's already done.
No, but it's great. It's great to create these templates, and then you can always go back and potentially use them. No, I mean that's the purpose of a template. You can use them multiple times and just change them accordingly, depending on the project.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if with the use of variables, because as you see, like everything is linked, just by changing the variables and the colors and so forth, it would completely change the template as well. So that's
Mhm.
the great thing about variables.
Awesome. Well, that was. Is that it for today's lesson?
Yes, so that's the end of part one. So just to recap,
Yes. Let's do a quick
remember
recap.
to turn off indexing when you create a new project. And then you can, set up all your variables, so your color variable, font, spacing, type, and then style your HTML tags in your project. So this is what we covered today, and hopefully it was clear enough. Yeah, with you and Lizzie being ex-teachers is like a bit daunting. Hopefully that made sense.
Absolutely. You're amazing, Alessia. I wouldn't have asked you if I didn't think, so I couldn't wait for this. And I know that you were like, "Oh my God, I just watched Lizzie's series. Panicking now. What should I do?" So I know you're fine. Seriously, just like share what you know, because
It was so good. Like, oh my God, I need to create resources.
you're such an inspiration, and I love your style. And just like again, to have you here inspiring the community and educating the community is all we could ask for, really. So appreciate you giving us the time and the commitment to host these sessions together. And speaking of time,
Thank you so much.
do you have a few minutes for a few questions?
Yeah, of course.
All right, let's do that. Let's say until quarter past. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Cool.
yeah,
Awesome. So my lovely Floxies in the room. Is there anyone here who would like to ask a question directly to Alessia, or just comment on the beautiful lesson we just had? If you would like to ask a question, you can either write it in the chat and I'll ask it for you, or you can use the emojis that you see in the Gather. So if you're still looking at Alessia's screen, if you've never used Gather before, press Escape on your keyboard so you can go back to the map view, and you can raise your hand and we'll ask you to ask your question. I can see something in the chat. Nicoletta says, "Do you have a tutorial for those template pages?"
recorded one? Not yet.
Maybe that could be
Maybe
a
to come.
resource. Yeah, that could be a resource.
Yeah. But yeah, this was kind of the tutorial. um, so yeah, I mean, I can do that. I'll put it on the list.
Awesome. Ashley, would you go into using templates? Do you find them easier to use for a project, or would you prefer the freedom of designing and building from scratch? And I think she's referring to templates from, the Webflow. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a tricky one. So personal preferences start from scratch because I've got my flow of doing things, and we also have full control. So Code and Wonder has a team of developers and designers, and we make sure that we keep the naming, class naming consistent. So we don't know what the template might have used. I mean, nowadays it's kind of, we have all these frameworks, so they might have used Mast or Client first. So it's a bit easier, but a lot of the time it's just rogue naming, especially, I think they changed it now, but before the templates class naming, they had to, be all like capital letters of like the first one, like camel case, and all kind of natural language written, which it's fine, but I prefer to have like a more consistent one. So pros and cons to templates. Some of them are very well structured, and it can be helpful to get a head start, and not maybe they already have all the animations built in that you don't have to do, and you just need to change the content and maybe do some layout shifts. But other times I find myself restructuring the whole thing when getting a template, or like refactoring the whole class naming. So yeah, starting from scratch sometimes is easier. I don't
Let's
know if that
see.
answered the
Yeah,
question.
I was checking. That was Ashley. Ashley. Yep, cool. Thumbs up. Awesome. We've got a question from Elsa, who's been watching as well, and then I'll go to Dina. So Elsa is asking, I know that you don't have a favorite framework, but is there one that you would recommend?
um, I've heard really good things about Mast.
Mm.
I'm also going over our class naming system, which doesn't have a name yet. So if you want to name it, that's though you will do me a favor in the next session. So that's what we're going to focus on if I'm still sharing. Yeah, classes and frameworks is the next one. So we're going to go over class naming, the way that I do it, structure, custom CSS, that sort of stuff. So more to come.
Oh, and you need a name for this? That's my thing. I'm just gonna spend the rest of the week thinking
And
about naming your framework.
God, yeah, you know how terrible I am at naming stuff. So yes, please.
Oh, I love that. Okay, awesome. Can't wait. Question from Dina here. Hi, Alessia. Thank you for the session today. I'm excited to go and build my boilerplate. Can you please repeat why we need to turn off the indexing at the very beginning?
Yes. So um, we all know the big giant Google, and most people use Google to search the web. And when you search, you have a bunch of results that pop up. So those results are all the pages that Google has found and what they say they indexed. So they put it in their folder of sites that they know of. So indexing a site means that Google knows of its existence, and it might surface it when you're searching for something. So this is great for sites which are live and you want them to be found, but sites which are work in progress, or maybe with the Webflow.io like staging site, you don't really want people to find those. So you want to turn off indexing for those sites so that Google doesn't know that they exist, and they don't surface them when people search for stuff.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Anything that you don't want for people to find online, basically. You don't want to be indexed.
Yeah.
And I guess for the sake of, the lessons that we host and the amazing speakers we have, and their time and everything, I guess I would like to ask all the people here. So we still have Irina, Tonya, Michelle, Lucy, Dina, Elizabeth, Heather, Nicoletta, Delia, Ashley. What's the one thing that you struggle with? It could be, you can choose design or Webflow. Give me the one topic that you find most tricky, and maybe we can find a way to tackle those issues in the upcoming lessons. I thought, I would just drop in a question, put you all on the spot.
That would be great. Yeah, because I mean, all of these are such like broad topics on themselves, and we need to condense them in 1 hour. So if you have a specific niche, I don't know, questions that you want us or me to focus on, specifically in frameworks or classes or like building in general, that would be great, and then I can focus on those.
Mm-hmm. Come on, drop them in the chat. Don't be shy. There is. Oh, Michelle, would you like to talk?
Hello there. Yeah.
Hello, hello.
This was excellent. I very much enjoy this presentation. I am very new to this community. This is my first event that I'm joining for the Floxies community, and it was excellent. But I guess this is super broad, but I guess I'm curious why the focus on Webflow. I kind of have used Webflow before, and I found it a little overwhelming, and I kind of was like, I'll deal with learning that another time, but it seems like this community is really focused on Webflow. And so I guess I'm just curious why Webflow over other platforms? And yeah, just overall, why are we focusing on Webflow?
Good
I
question.
have one answer, but Claudia, do you want to reply about Floxies?
Not sure. So we started off with Figma and Webflow just because it was so the connection there when I started about 3 years ago now, transitioning from education into design. Figma and Webflow were just going hand in hand. And so when I first came about the role of a UX UI designer and started studying design and Figma, and actually I started with Adobe XD first, gotten into design a bit more. And then when I finally discovered Webflow, it changed my life. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. And like to see all my designs come to life was absolutely fantastic. So that was my platform of choice. And I've then discovered a whole community of women that were quietly using Webflow. And I was like, hey, let's all get together and let's be loud and proud about it. That was the reason, why Floxies kind of focuses on Figma and Webflow. And also because we started teaming up people inside of the community, designers that don't necessarily want to develop on Webflow. We have Webflow developers in the community that don't necessarily want to design. And so we put them together. They've been creating fantastic teams. Like we have Irina and Lucy here, who are a testament of that. They've been working together on projects, and it's absolutely great to see. We love the platform. We love the community. We have a good relationship with them. And it has changed my life. And so what I wanted to do in the community was to help other people change their lives as well. But Alessia, you must have a more technical reason on why Webflow is amazing.
Yeah, less personal one maybe. So I'm don't come from a development background. I've learned HTML and CSS, a little bit of JavaScript, before entering like the no code or like Webflow world. And I feel like I like creating stuff for myself, but I always needed a developer or struggle to do things myself. I mean, there's lots of website builders out there. You got, the Wix and Squarespace and WordPress and Elementor, which is WordPress, and all of these that you can kind of like drag and drop. But I always find them a little bit limiting. Like you have to pick the template, and you can't deviate too much from that template, so it doesn't give you as much creative freedom. Some of them are changing. So Wix introduced Wix Studio, which is I heard, I haven't tried it yet, but it gives you a little bit more freedom in creating what you want. So they're all kind of going a little bit in that direction. But Webflow was the first one that gave complete creative freedom to create, to add any CSS that you want and any HTML. And they do that in a visual way. So I guess it's one of the first ones which was, or like coined the term visual coding, because you're writing code by, clicking buttons and not writing code itself. You now also have Framer, which also it's very visual and maybe more so than Webflow. in terms of it's closer to Figma than it is to actual code. And it uses React as the main framework. But yeah, it only came about, I want to say 3 years ago, before it was a prototyping tool. So Webflow kind of was the first one that came across that
Yeah.
did this. And like you said, it's quite overwhelming, right? When you first log in, especially now that they added all these new features, you go in and you're like, oh my God, what is all this stuff? So I guess it needs more support from the community to get other people to learn how to use Webflow and eventually learn how to code, because that could be a gateway of actually learning to code
Yeah.
through Webflow.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you there. Less sentimental. Now, on a more serious note, I did find it a lot easier to build my first website on Webflow, and just for the fact that it was so visual, and I'm pretty much a visual learner myself. And so then after you get that first feeling of, oh my God, I can do this, then you really start nerding out and you want to get better and better. And yes, it allows you to get interested in things like HTML and CSS and all sorts of things that were maybe scary to your younger self, but that now you actually want to learn because you want to see how far you can go with this tool.
And
I
it can
guess,
go very
yeah.
far. Like you can build enterprise clients and sites and all of that stuff. So it could go from one landing page all the way to hundreds of pages as well.
Yeah, and it's really stable because it sits on top of Amazon, right? Amazon servers. So
Yeah.
the downtime of your actual websites is very, very little, if any. So yeah, a bit of passion, bit of technicalities, but we love it, and that's what we're here for. And obviously, having this community at Floxies makes it, as somebody was saying in the chat, makes it a lot easier to love the tool and love the community and just love the amazing people that are part of it, like Alessia and all the speakers we've had.
I guess a question back to you is, what other tools would you like to learn or discover?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on some of them. I've used Elementor / WordPress for some clients, and Framer just because I'm like most familiar with Figma. But yeah, you guys have definitely inspired me to kind of go back, relook at Webflow with a new, perspective. And obviously, now that I'm in this community, take advantage of all the resources and talks to support that learning. So I am excited to get back into it. It sounds like there are a lot of benefits, and it's evolved a lot over the years, maybe that I've kind of put it to the side. But yeah, I think it's definitely sounds like a worthwhile tool that a lot of people are getting good advantage out of. So I'll get back into learning it.
Great. And
I
yeah,
love
Floxies
that.
is amazing. Like you have, I'm really bad at getting into Discord. It's just not the place for me. But every time I go in, you have like all the forums and everyone helping each other. So yeah, Michelle, if you have any questions, just put it in the Floxies community, and they come together and help you out.
Will come to the rescue. But yeah, I was just gonna add that you couldn't have joined at a better time because it is true. If you're picking up Webflow now, it's very different to what it used to be 3 years ago. And so we're very fortunate to be starting this series with Alessia here because she's an absolute superstar. She's smashing it this year. I can envision great things for her before the end of 2024, and so we're here together I'm also going to get back into developing a little bit more, and so I'm very happy that I get to do it with Alessia and her teaching and her learning and experience. So Alessia, thank you very much. I'm sorry we kind of went over a little bit for you, but
Pleasure.
appreciate having you here, and I'll see you next time. Is it next week? Because I know that we have to pause.
Yes.
Yeah, but next week we're
We
here.
got next week. We're gonna go over classes.
Awesome.
So yes.
All right. Well, my lovely Floxies, see you in class for classes next week. Bye everyone.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Have a lovely evening.